is Richard Crawford, and I've built my career on representing luxury brands around the world. And in doing so, I've had the privilege of having some truly out-of-the-ordinary experiences. But at what cost? It's getting harder and harder to blindly ignore the impact our extravagant lifestyle is having on the planet and its people. So I've decided to investigate whether there really is a sustainable way to visit the wonders of the world but still have extraordinary luxury. Can I have globe-trotting adventures without leaving a significant footprint? Well, let's find out. And by using the basic principles that define ecotourism, which are minimal impact, sustainability, social responsibility, and of course, let's not forget overall guest experience, I will rate my travels around the planet to see if we really can make a difference. This episode is a special one for me because it takes me back to the land of my birth, Scotland. I'm going to take you on a journey to the rugged and beautiful Outer Hebrides, a remote island chain off the northwest coast of Scotland. Now, there are more than 65 islands, but only 15 are actually inhabited. And as we'll find out, they have had people on them since about 3200 BC. I can only assume people were much shorter back then. The main islands of Harris and Lewis are where we are headed. Both the economy and the environment is extremely fragile in this area, and so there's a remarkable effort to turn to renewable energy generation and sustainable tourism to both protect and revitalise the region. Out there in the world is going to get a little bit of Harris tweed that was hand or foot woven by me. That's pretty exciting. So come with me as we explore the Outer Hebrides and learn what the locals are doing to leave no trace. As a kid growing up here, I used to literally run across a 4-lane road to come here to this airport. This is Glasgow Airport, which, believe it or not, is actually in a town called Paisley, which is where I grew up. And I would stand at this fence for hours and watch planes come in and take off with such a sense of wonder and awe. Trying to think where they came from, where they were going, to me was just incredible. Now, in my mind, Scotland has always been a really welcoming place. So much so that 15 years ago, the government put into act the freedom to roam. And what that means is everybody who comes to Scotland is welcome to just set up for a couple of days wherever and enjoy the place that they're in, as long as they're not making a nuisance of themselves and as long as they're not making a mess. Now, on this show, we've been to some amazing places around the world, and I've shown you guys some incredible things. But I'm so proud right now to be in Scotland. So, please come on this journey with me so I can show you my country. So now we're heading to our final destination, the Outer Hebrides. Now, the Outer Hebrides are made up of several islands, but we're actually going to visit the two largest islands, Lewis and Harris. Now, when we decided to do Scotland for an episode, it was very personal for me and I was very excited to do it. But if we did mainland Scotland, there's so much to see and so much to do that it literally would take us half a year and we'd have about 20 hours worth of footage for a TV show. So what I decided was that we go visit these islands on the Outer Hebrides because honestly, they're a distilled version of what Scotland is. There's everything there that we would see in Scotland. We have whiskey and gin. We have a very strong textile industry there. We have incredible views, which goes for anywhere that you go in Scotland. And they have a very, very strong eco and sustainable ethos. Now, this is the final leg to actually get there, and we're on a ferry that has just left the mainland, which is right behind me. And we're heading about 2 hours west to reach the islands. So let's go see what they're all about. So here we are in Stornoway, our port of entry into the Outer Hebrides. Now Stornoway only has a population of about 8,000 people, but believe it or not, that still makes it the second largest island town in all of Scotland. Now the whole reason that Stornoway even exists is because it has a protected harbour, which means all the farmers and all the fishermen around the islands could bring their goods up here on horse and cart and get it to the mainland. Now today it's still a commercial port, but as you can see, it's also a great place to do a little sailing. The total population of these islands is just over 20,000 people. Now, interestingly enough, over the last 100 years, the population of the islands has actually decreased by about 50%. Now, I assumed that was just young people going out off the island and broadening their horizons. But when I asked the local, I got a very typical one-word Scottish answer. He looked me dead in the eye and he said, contraception. Now, the islands are steeped in history, and there's evidence of people living here for over 7,000 years. More recently, the 8th and 9th century AD, the Vikings and the Norsemen inhabited these islands, and there's actually still an influence of that, especially in the language. Speaking of history, where we're staying, our accommodation while we're on the island, has a very unique link to the history of these islands. So let's go check it out. Oh, by the way, this is the last bastion of Sabbatarianism in the British Isles, which basically means nothing is open and nobody does anything on a Sunday. So if you do happen to find yourself here on a Sunday, a little word of warning, be prepared. Otherwise you're going to go hungry and you're going to run out of gas. So here's our accommodation for the next couple of days. The Broch House. Now a broch is actually an ancient Iron Age fortress where communities would find safe haven when they're being attacked by their enemies, and you find these brochs all up and down the west coast of Scotland. This particular broch is actually the first broch that's been built since the Iron Age. Now, how do you get to your broch? Well, the first thing you do is cross your drawbridge over your defensive moat. This particular one's dry at the moment, which is really unusual for Scotland. But the first thing you'll notice is the building materials. This is all local stone. And when these brochs were being built, they were really pushing the boundaries for dry stone wall construction. And you can see at the bottom here, it's really sturdy. It's about 2 meters thick. But what's really interesting is that when they're building brochs, they don't pre-plan where all the bricks are going to be laid. It's kind of haphazard and random. But as long as they stay flat and continue to build up, I guess they're good. And this particular broch is actually inspired by the ancient Caraway block, which we'll see later on. So let's go check it out. Oh wow, what a surprise. Wow. You know, the first thing that greets you on the ground floor here is this really bright and spacious kitchen, which actually brings up a good point. A lot of the accommodation on the island is self-catering because they want to encourage people to spend money on local produce to keep the communities alive. And what's really surprising to me is how modern the kitchen is, considering the outside looks so ancient. They've really gone, from what I understand, they've really gone for a raw, minimalist design. Now I'm really impressed by the staircase, which is actually made of wood from wind-blown trees on the beach. And just to cap it all off, they got this wrought iron handrail, which I guess makes sense because these buildings were from the Iron Age. And here on the second floor, we have the main living space, which has all the mod cons, including a TV, although I don't know why you need that when you've got everything you want to see out of that beautiful bay window right there. Now on colder nights, we got a little wood burning stove, which actually brings up a really good point. These buildings are really energy efficient. Between the 2 meter thick stone walls, the double glazing glass that keeps the heat in, and the air source heat pump, which provides underfloor heating on every level. It's about energy efficient as you can get. On the same floor, we have the master bathroom, which has this wonderful deep tub. And again, with the window right there, you've got a beautiful view as you're taking a bath. What I find really neat about this property is anytime you see a surface or a table stone, it's made out of stone, but there's nothing joining the pieces together. It's just stone laid on top of stone. I think it's really creative and really neat. And on the third floor, the top floor, we have the master bedroom, which makes sense to me because you want the best views from your master bedroom. And speaking of best views, they've got this beautiful bay window, floor to ceiling glass, so that you have a perfect view of everything out there. Now I asked them why this window was facing that way and not out to the beach. And they told me in order to keep with tradition, this window actually faces an Iron Age citadel ruin, which was typical back then because all of these brocks needed a direct line of sight. The network needed to keep an open form of communication. Now we have a king-size bed, 4-poster bed made from wood, and of course, keeping with the rest of the property, this is all fallen tree. And to cap it all off, we have the skylight, which you could lie in bed, look at the stars at night, except that here, in the summer, there's 18 hours of daylight, so you're most probably looking at the sun. I just hope, like me, you're an early riser. You know, I think overall, the most impressive thing about this building for me is how it really blends into its environment. You'd almost not know that it's here if you weren't actually looking for it. As you can imagine, being made up of more than 65 islands, water plays a major part in life here in the Outer Hebrides. So I decided to track down local legend Lewis Mackenzie of Fish and Trips to take me out on the water and show me how important it is to both the local economy and the environment here. Hey, how you doing, man?
Fine, thanks.
Good, you must be Lewis.
I am. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. Now, I have to ask you, are you named after the island or is the island named after you?
Just don't call me Harris.
So what are we going to get up to today?
Going to head out to sea and basically wildlife, hopefully.
See some wildlife out there. What kind of things we're going to see?
Good mixture this time of year. White-tailed sea eagles, great skuas, seals, full range of seabirds. You just don't know what you're going to encounter.
Fantastic.
It's the Hebrides.
It's just as well we didn't get a typical Scottish day, otherwise we couldn't get out there. Now, am I ready to rock like this? I should be okay?
Well, we'll get you into kind of waterproofs maybe.
Are you saying I'm going to get a little wet?
Maybe.
Let's go, let's go.
Going to keep an eye open along this cliff edge. It's one of the
seals?
roosting points for the eagles.
Oh, the eagle.
Yeah.
How many are there on the island, do you know?
There's only about 26 breeding pairs.
26 breeding pairs?
There's about 120 birds in the whole of Britain.
On the whole of Britain?
Yeah.
And basically just under half of them are here?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So unique.
Where else are they? Like it's
just west coast of Scotland. And there's one pair in Orkney.
And they're specific to Scotland?
They were in Britain,
right?
Up until about 1918, when the Victorians started shooting them as trophies. So the last one
those damn Victorians
was shot in about 1918.
Wow.
And there was none in Britain until 1975, when they took 4 birds in from Norway and released them.
Okay.
And they've bred and spread from there.
So it's not just birds and fish around these islands, we also have marine mammals. Little head popping up right there is a common seal. There are 2 types of seal in Scotland. There's a grey seal and the common seal. And sticking to true Scottish logic, the common seal is actually less common than the grey seal. But they're really, really cute. Sticking the head out of the water like there reminds me of little dogs. As with most animals, the well-being of these seals is a very, very fine balance, and they're very, very cute to look at, and nobody would ever hurt them intentionally. But believe it or not, one of the biggest dangers to these seals are canine diseases. I know, it sounds really strange, but when you think about it, these seals hang out in beach areas where people walk their dogs, and canine diseases are transferred to them. So it just goes to show you, you have to be really aware and really think about what you're doing when it comes to the environment and it comes to these kind of animals. So this is Barry, named by Lewis because he's good friends with Lewis. And Barry's a great skewer, which is part of the albatross family. Now Barry's actually a North African bird, well, close to Nigeria. Is that right, Lewis?
Yeah.
But he will migrate up to the west of Scotland every year, and then during the summer, and even up to the Arctic Circle. I don't want to put my fingers too close because he'll bite them. But look at that. He wanted that pinky. Just put a little pinky up there. Yeah, that's Barry. Thanks, Barry. Wow. So this is why ecotourism is so important. So you can literally get this close to the animals in their natural habitat. Of course, we're not penning these guys in or forcing them to do this. But it also shows you why it's so important to keep all these environments so clean and healthy so these guys can survive too. Bye, Barry! Now another thing, most people know Scotland for its Scotch whisky, but not a lot of people know that we actually have a pretty big gin industry also. And what I found out today, which was even more surprising, is there's a small gin distillery here on Harris Island, and it's made up of many botanicals, and one of those is actually seaweed, the sugar kelp. So Lewis, I would like to harvest a little bit of my own sugar kelp here, so I can go make some gin. Can we do that?
Yeah, if you're ready for the show.
I'm absolutely ready for it. In fact, I'm so ready for it, I prepared this wetsuit earlier. Now, you promised me the water wasn't that cold, right?
Balmy 14.
No. Okay, well, let's go. Sugar kelp. So now I can go make some gin. Well, I have to say, that's a pretty productive day. That looks like a good sized piece of sugar kelp seaweed. What will this give me, Lewis? About 4 bottles of gin?
Yeah, enough to get you drunk.
That's enough. Once I've finally dried off, I'll take my sugar kelp to make my very own gin. I visit the first roadside takeaway I've ever been to that tempts both my taste buds and my integrity. It's the honour system. So if this was any other city in the world, I think there would be more money coming out than going in, but I'll put my money in here right now. And later on, I make my very own Harris tweed jacket. Does that look like James Bond? Well, here I am. I have my sugar kelp. I'm at the Isle of Harris Distillers. And I mentioned earlier that Scotland, and everybody knows this, is famous for Scotch whisky, so I didn't really want to talk about that. But what a lot of people don't know is Scotland has a growing gin industry, so I wanted to get into that just a little bit. So I'm here at the Isle of Harris Distillers because they make Harris gin. And what's incredible is that very recently, these guys won the Product of the Year at the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. And that's across all food and drink categories. And what's even more remarkable is that they've only been open for about 2.5 years. So let's go see what that's all about. Simon?
Oh, Richard.
Hey, how are you, man?
Good to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. Managing Director, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
well,
right.
first of all, congratulations on your most recent award.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, I must say, the team's really proud. After
Yeah.
2.5 years of existence, to be Scotland's Product of the Year in the Food and Drink Awards is quite amazing.
It's pretty amazing. Now,
Yeah.
I harvested my own kelp, so I want to turn this into gin. Can
Good.
you take care of that?
Absolutely, Richard. We'll sort that for you, no problem.
So tell me a little bit about what makes this operation so special.
Yeah, well, I guess we're unique as a distillery in that we were set up with the purpose of economic regeneration for Harris and for the Outer Hebrides. So we're probably the first distillery in the world with that objective in mind. We want to be here for generations to provide sustainable employment for local people. I've got 28 employees already at the distillery, all sourced from the island. My distillers have never distilled before in their lives, so they're the proudest distillers on the planet. But hopefully we can create direct employment through what we do, but also importantly, by sending our spirits out into the world, we can bring Harris to the attention of a broader audience. We can encourage more tourism, and therefore we can act as a catalyst for other enterprises to set up and to boost the economy in more general terms.
And not only all of that, it sounds like you're making a pretty good product also if these awards are anything to go by.
Well, we like to think so.
Yeah,
it's very
yeah.
important. What goes in the bottle is at the end of the day what it's all about.
Exactly. Well, let's go see how it's made. So this is where all the magic happens. This is where all the ingredients are brought together and put into the still. So tell me a little bit about the process here.
Yeah, so this is our wee pot still.
Yep.
She's called the Dotach, named after a feisty wee lady who lived on a nearby island.
The dotach.
The Dotach.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to take that the botanicals
Yep.
that were macerating
Okay.
in our spirit for 24 hours. We'll take a whiff.
Oh yeah, you know what? I can actually smell my kelp in there.
So what we're going to do, we're going to put those botanicals inside the body of the still.
Right, right.
Okay. And then we're going to very gently warm her up and distill the spirit through to extract more flavor from the botanicals to,
Okay.
as a second stage in the process.
Yep.
It's going to come out here at the end in our spirit safe, and then we're going to reduce the alcohol to 45% with our local Harris water,
Yep.
and then we're going to bottle the gin.
So it's not all just about the product here, Simon. You guys have a really positive impact on tourism, haven't you?
Well, we set out with a target of maybe 40,000 visitors to come to the distillery, which we thought was quite ambitious.
Yeah.
But we were amazed that within 2 years we had 80,000 people came through our doors last year.
Oh wow, that's double.
So the island's really buzzing. So we're really excited that we've had some impact already. So here we are in the bottling hall. So the gin's been produced. So we bring it over here and we're going to put it into our bottle and send it out to the world.
Now, speaking of bottle and the glass, this is a really, really pretty bottle. Tell me a little bit about it.
Do you remember that mission to send the spirit of Harris out to the world?
Yep.
So this bottle really it really emulates Harris and the seas and the coast. It's decorated with this turquoise to make it look like the seas that you find on the island.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
So I'd like to present you with your very own bottle of Isle of Harris gin. So thank you for your visit here today.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. But I have to ask now, is my sugar kelp in this bottle? Because I braved some pretty cold waters off the coast of the islands in a wetsuit. Let me tell you guys, the seas were angry that day. The seas were angry.
Yeah, I think your sugar kelp is bound to be in there. Look, it says even it says on the label, infused with sugar kelp. That must be yours.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm going to go off now and have a Harris gin martini.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So here it is, my Harris gin martini. Shaken, not stirred, of course. Yep, I can really taste my sugar kelp in there. So after I finish my third martini, I'm off to learn more about the history of the islands, including visiting a fortified broch over 2,000 years old. Scotland and its islands are steeped in history, and there's actually evidence that there were inhabitants on these islands up to 7,000 years ago. But the earliest physical evidence we have is here, at the famous Callanish stones. Now these stones are actually 3000 BC, which means that about 5,000 years old, and technically that predates Stonehenge. Now, nobody really knows why they're here. There are lots of theories, and certainly many people think that this may have been a burial ground. But as with most of these kinds of sites around the world, many people think that these stones were placed where they are in order to line up with celestial bodies. It's just remarkable to think that 5,000 years ago, a group of men and women put this stone, all of these stones, in the ground, and I'm standing here looking at them today. I know one thing's for sure, they weren't put here to protect you from the Scottish weather. A more recent example of inhabitants on this island, and when I say more recent, I'm definitely talking relatively, because we're talking 3,000 years after the Callanish stones, is this broch, the Caraway broch. Now, it's Norse influenced name because Caraway actually means Carl's Lake, which is basically down there. Now, this would have housed family, and according to some experts, the wall on the east side there, at the moment, even as dilapidated as it is 9 meters high, so they thought that this would be a pretty big structure, which means the family had some status. But it wouldn't just be the people staying in here, it would be the animals also. And it was also have acted as a defensive structure. It's pretty strategically placed right up here on the top of the hill, so they can see people coming for miles around. And this is actually the best example of a broch in Scotland. So let's go take a closer look. I can only assume that they were much shorter back then. Oh wow, yeah, this is pretty impressive. I can really get a sense of a family living in here and other animals and a big fireplace going. And this is another great example of dry stone wall construction. And again, what's so fascinating to me is that 2,000 years ago, somebody here with their own two hands put these rocks in place. And here is me 2,000 years later looking at his work. And it's so precise. There's very little gaps, there's no cement used. However, about 500 years ago, the gaps were big enough for a clan member whose cattle had been stolen and hidden in here to use his two daggers, scale the outside of the building, light a little heather, throw it in, and smoke these guys out. Now, I had mentioned earlier at our accommodation, the Broch House, that it was influenced by a broch, and it was actually influenced by this particular broch, and you can see the sturdiness of it. The small difference between our accommodation and this broch is the skylight's just a little bit bigger. Moving along with the chronology of the history of human habitation on these islands, this is our latest structure. This is a black house. It's got a thatched roof, and again, as you can see, it's got the dry stone wall construction, and it's starting to make sense to me because this is about the only material that you find around here outside of grass, and they're even using the grass because they have the thatched roof. Now, this particular black house was built in 1880, and it was actually lived in up until 1966, and today it's preserved and left in a way that it would have looked like when these people lived in it, so that people could come and visit and get a sense of what that was like. So let's go in and have a look. The whole structure is focused around this central room, basically the living room, and more importantly, the peat fire. Now, the peat smoke is important because it keeps the insects away, keeps the house relatively warm, but most importantly, it keeps the roof dry. Now, the disadvantages are that everything inside the house is black. It's very difficult to breathe, and it's very, very smelly. I know when I leave here for days later, I'll still smell like this. What's incredible is to think that people actually lived in this house up until 1966. And in general, in the 1920s, people started to move up into what was called the White House from the Black House. And the biggest difference is that the animals didn't live under the same roof anymore. And I have to tell you, being here really gives me an appreciation for modern luxury. And this is a typical bedroom where the whole family would sleep. And it's certainly a far cry from my nice four-poster bed at the Brock House. This is in essence what would have been the barn, where the animals would have been housed and fed. And what sets this apart is that even although it's all still under the one roof, the walls would have actually separated the animals from the people. Wow, finally fresh air. I can breathe. I can actually see the smoke coming out of the thatched roof there. You know, a little point of interest. Traditionally, that fire would never go out, and even today, as they preserve this, they never let that fire go out. Well, now, back to high-speed internet. Well, here we are, the famous Croft 36. Sustainable, which is great for us, and local. I don't think you get any more local than this. Now, this little hut is actually owned by Steve and his daughter, who are farmers and crofters in the land behind us. And every day they come up here and fill up this little hut with food for anybody that happens to be hungry. And usually available is this list of items on the menu. However, if that runs out, there'll be more meals and pastries later on. Later on might be tonight, later on might be tomorrow. So here we are. Everything in here is literally farm to table, or in this case, farm to hut. And when I say farm to hut, I mean that farm right out there to this hut in here. Now, Steve and his daughter provide all the food in here. They've either caught it, they've either grown it, or they have prepared it and baked it. Now, that makes Steve a very, very busy man. Therefore, he does not have time to stand out here, serve people food, and take the money. So what has he done? He's set up a suggested price board right here, and you basically pay what you think the value of the food is. And not only that, it's the honor system. So if this was any other city in the world, I think there would be more money coming out than going in. But I'll put my money in here right now. Now, what is also remarkable is that many big restaurants around the world strive to get a 5-star rating on TripAdvisor. These guys got a 5-star rating here, have had it 4 years in a row, and it's so popular that the 5 minutes I've been standing here, there's a huge line of people outside waiting to come in here and eat. So I paid my money, I'm gonna grab a bite to eat and get on our way. So here I am on the Isles of Lewis and Harris in the northwest part of Scotland. And you know, when I first told people I was coming to the Isle of Harris, the first thing that came to mind for them was Harris tweed, the world famous textile. And certainly when I was growing up, there was nothing more dapper than a gentleman in his Harris tweed jacket. Now, in keeping with family tradition, it's now my turn to buy my very own Harris tweed jacket. And I thought, what better place to do that than right here in Stornoway at the Harris Tweed Authority. The family would be proud. Well, I think I'm finally getting to the heart of Harris tweed. Lorna?
Yes, hi.
Hey, how are you? I'm Richard.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me here. So, is this where I can purchase all my Harris tweed clothes?
This is not the right place to come, no. Not for clothes. Harris tweed is a cloth. It's a hand-woven fabric we make here on the island, and our cloth is bought by multitude of brands who will make you some lovely clothes.
So in order for something to be Harris tweed, what has to happen?
Harris tweed is surrounded in a very strict definition, and indeed is surrounded by an Act of Parliament which protects it. And that Act of Parliament states that Harris tweed must be hand woven at the home of the weaver from 100% pure new wool. And the yarn used and the finishing processes afterwards must all take place on these islands. No element on the manufacture of Harris tweed can take place anywhere other than on the islands of Lewis and Harris.
Wow, fascinating. Well, now talking to you, I'm definitely ready to get my Harris tweed jacket. So where do I start to even get myself a jacket?
I think you need to go to the mill now.
To the mill? To the mill it is. This is the Carloway Mill, one of only 3 mills in the whole world that is licensed to make Harris tweed, and all 3 of them are on these islands. This particular mill is actually the youngest, and it was opened in 1980. And what I'm really fascinated by and really curious to find out is how a global brand like Harris tweed can come out of what in essence looks like a cottage industry mill. Let's go check it out. Okay, so I'm going to try and condense what is a fairly complex process into just a few minutes. And I start by meeting Donald, who has worked in the industry for almost 50 years. Now he tells me that the process starts with pure virgin wool shown from Cheviot and Scottish blackface sheep. The wool is dyed in these big stainless steel vats, turning it into the multitude of colours that are used to create the final cloth. Every product here has its own pattern, and that requires blending different colours together. And what's the blend that we have today?
Today is pink, LL pink with
LL pink.
Yes.
What colours mix that?
There's white, pink, dark orange, violet,
And blue ray.
blue.
So basically what happens is all those primary colours are coming here to the floor, hand fed into this tube. A huge fan is switched on, and it goes through pipes into ultimately a big bin. And what it looks like when it's turned on is a big candy floss machine. Unfortunately, we don't have it turned on today because it's just so loud and you'll never be able to hear what I'm saying. But we can go have a look at what the final product looks like after it comes out of the bin. Let's go check it out. As you can see, I wasn't kidding when I said it looks and feels like cotton candy, and you can see the mixture of all the colours that we talked about in here. Now from here it goes into a machine to be a little more refined. But you know what? I've always wanted to do this. Now at the end of the refining process, it comes out through this machine, the carding machine. And ultimately what it is at this point is a very coarse roll, but it's still pretty weak. And it has to be taken, I would presume, to be spun a little further to strengthen it, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so let's go have a little look at the spinning. Yeah.
By the way, did you jump into my wool?
Jump into your wool? Well, what makes you think that? The wool is then spun onto these bobbins, which strengthens it. Some bobbins head straight to the weaver, and more on that in a minute, while others are put on a fairly impressive machine called a beam. Now, producing a Harris tweed pattern is a very intricate process. And what happens is the bobbins are all brought here and placed on specific pegs and thread through this creel machine in such a way that it produces the pattern that we're looking for. It is then all brought together here and put on this beam rolling machine. And at the other side here, we have this beam of wool ready to go. Now, this is only part one of a two-part process. This wool, or this, will now go out to the weaver, as well as this little card, which will help the weaver understand what he has to do in order to make the pattern that we're looking for. Now, I'm heading over to a weaver now. Do you mind if I take this little card with my Harris tweed on there?
That'd be fine.
That'd be good?
Yes,
okay.
no
Now, my car is a little small, so I don't have room for this. Could you guys send it over there? And I'll meet them there. Fantastic. Well, I'll get over there and I'll see you guys soon. Ah, he is. Ian? Hello. Hey, Richard Crawford, how are you?
Very good.
Good. This is your weaving shed, right?
Yes.
I've come to the right place? Oh, wow. Well, that all looks very technical, Ian. I'm not sure I know any of the jargon for this. Tell me what is this?
This is a double width loom.
Double width loom.
To make Harris tweed.
Yeah. So where's the switch to switch this on?
Nothing, it's all hand woven, pedal woven. So
Really?
You'll have a short in a wee while, but
Like,
it's,
you literally have to pedal it.
yes.
So
all
it's actually
hand woven.
foot woven, it's not hand woven.
Yeah, it's sort of both these woven.
Can you show me? I gotta see this. So this is going to operate. This is the power supply for the loom.
This is me weaving Harris tweed like this.
That's great. You must be in pretty good shape. Do you mind if I try it?
You can have a go.
Yeah. So somebody out there in the world is going to get a little bit of Harris tweed that was hand or foot woven by me. That's pretty exciting.
Oh, it is, yeah.
So that's it. You do this about what, 40 hours a week?
Oh no, much more than that. 60 hours a week.
60 hours
so.
a week. Wow. Well, I think I've done my part. I'm getting tired. I'm not in the best physical shape. Wow, okay, that's pretty neat. I didn't hear any alarm bells, so that's good.
So that's it, yeah.
You know, when I showed up here, I thought I was just going to get a little example of how this was done, but Ian's put me to work for about 16 hours and 54 meters of Harris tweed later, and about $3,000 worth. I got to get it back to the mill.
Hope you're coming back tomorrow to help me finish another one now.
Sure, I'll be back tomorrow. Let's get out of here. So once I'm back at the mill, Donald was no help at all.
Right, do your hands.
But he did show me the next step, which involves a team checking for any imperfections and darning them if needed. The material, which Donald tells me is called greasy tweed at this stage, then goes to be degreased. So here is where we degrease the greasy tweed, and ultimately it's just a big washing machine. The tweed is tied at the ends, and it goes around in a big loop for about 30 minutes in soapy water until the soap turns white. And then it's brought here to the mill machine, and the mill machine basically shrinks it and thickens it. And what's remarkable is these machines are still working every day today, but I'm looking up here and I'm seeing that the machine was made in 1892. How come, guys, you don't replace it?
Because it's still working.
Because it's still, very Scottish answer, because it's still working. And by the way, these guys went out of business in 1893 because they never had to replace anything. So the material has been washed, dried, and steam pressed, and what that did was increase the integrity of it. So ultimately what we have left is 50 metres by 1.5 metres bolt of cloth. Now I understand this pattern has some significance.
Yes, I believe this pattern was used by Sean Connery in one of his Bond films.
One of his Bond films,
Yes.
really? So what's good enough for Sean is good enough for me. That's the best Sean Connery I got. Now, it is not yet Harris tweed. In order for that to happen, the inspector has to come in, make sure that all the stipulations have been met, at which point he will sign a certificate, mill declaration, followed by a signature from Donald, is that correct?
Yeah.
With the pattern and the
Shade number.
and the shade number on there. Then, and only then, will he give it the world famous orb stamp of approval. And what's really fascinating is because of these numbers, the piece and the pattern, everyone who's ever touched this material can be traced back and held accountable. Well, I have to say, Donald, it's time for me to take this down and get my own Harris tweed jacket made. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been an education. I've absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you.
Sorry, Dad. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.
You know, after everywhere we've been and everything I've seen, I realise that this is not just a jacket. It's a product of a whole community, and it's going to be worth every single penny that I spend on it. Look, do you see that little bit right there?
Yeah.
I actually weaved that. Do I look like James Bond?
Yeah.
So my time here in the Outer Hebrides has come to an end. And you know, when I arrived, I was worried about the economics of the island, with so many people leaving and so many challenges for tourism. But on leaving, I am hopeful. The beauty of the area is unquestioned. The locals are making great inroads in providing eco-tourist adventures, and there can be no doubt about the social responsibility of the local employers, seeing how so much effort is spent on keeping traditional work on the islands. What I am worried about though is that the islands will fall foul of the same fate of their southern neighbour, the Isle of Skye. After being awarded in Condé Nast Reader's Choice Award, it has very quickly become saturated with tourists. Hopefully this won't happen to the Outer Hebrides, as they are much harder to access. I have to admit though, these islands are one of my favourite places in the world, and since filming, I've actually been back 5 more times. So how does the Outer Hebrides fare on the Leave No Trace Eco Scorecard? Taking all of our criteria into consideration, I have given the Outer Hebrides an A-. What better place to end this episode than here? You know, the Outer Hebrides offers everything you would expect from Scotland. Beautiful landscape, very, very friendly people, but it also offers the unexpected. White sandy beaches, who would have thought that? You know, this episode has been really near and dear to me. I grew up in Scotland, but as a young man I never had the opportunity, or to be honest, the inclination to come to somewhere like this. Over the past several years I've been very fortunate and been able to travel the world and see some incredibly beautiful places with my crew. And I always joke with them, you haven't seen anything yet until you've seen Scotland, and now that they're here, I think they would wholly agree. Wouldn't you guys? Yeah. You know, so again, it's not just about the landscape here, it's also about the people too. And it's a very tight-knit community. And talking to several of the people this week, I realised that tourism is very important to their economic development, but it's a double-edged sword and a fine balance. Too much tourism here would ruin the place. So, now that I've let you into my little secret, look after it. And please, for my sake and the sake of all the people on these islands, when you come and visit here, leave no trace. I'm Richard Crawford. It's a bra nicht. Until next time. Well, I guess that rules me out.